the Alabama dynasty is dead. He has as many unranked losses in a year in a game as Nick Saban had in his entire tenure.
Week 1 of college football is in the books, and there were a lot of overreactions. So what's one actual overreaction and one appropriate reaction?
Yeah, I think an overreaction is that Ohio State is now clearly the best team in the country. I mean, look, you're the defending national champion. You knock off number one to begin the year. There's going to be a lot of talk and a lot of hype. That's fair. I wasn't entirely impressed with Ohio State, though. I was impressed with their defense and Matt Patricia, but I thought on offense they had, they left some things to be desired. I think I couldn't run the ball very well. I think Julian Sayin, though he was better than Arch Manning, did struggle a bit in his debut. So I think I still have questions about the Buckeyes. But an appropriate reaction, I think, is that the Alabama dynasty is dead. Blowout loss by 14 points to Florida State. I don't think many of us really saw that coming. And, this team just doesn't look like the Alabama of years past. The defensive effort, I mean, it was low effort, lack of focus defensively. Didn't look like a Nick Saban coach team. And now DeBoer falls to 9-5 at Alabama. I mean, he has as many unranked losses in a year in a game as Nick Saban had in his entire tenure. So I think that the floor here could be way lower than any of us thought was even possible for Alabama this season.
Those are good ones. My overreaction is about Arch Manning. Arch Manning's bad. He's not the guy. He's not going to take Texas anywhere. It's ridiculous. He is still relatively inexperienced as a first-year starter and was up against one of the best defenses in the country on their own turf. Yeah, he looked shaky at best. He completed 57% of his passes through a touchdown, but also an interception. But he's not doomed. Texas is not doomed. Everybody needs to calm down. It was a shaky start, but a week 1 start against a very good team. Now, my appropriate reaction is going to be that North Carolina is not very good. Obviously not the college football debut that Bill Belichick wanted, but, not only did TCU have 2 defensive touchdowns against the Tar Heels, but North Carolina's defense looked so outmatched, so unprepared, whether it was in the front 7 or the secondary. They just didn't look like they could stop anything. And TCU put up 41 unanswered points. So it's not an overreaction, I think, to say or to wonder if UNC is going to win more than 4 football games this year. Deion Sanders and Bill Belichick are 2 of the most high-profile college football coaches. So who had a worse week 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is pretty obviously Bill Belichick. Look, Colorado lost by 7 points at home. Not great, but to a Georgia Tech team that I think could be a legit ACC dark horse contender. North Carolina looked abysmal. I mean, that frankly was embarrassing. I think Bill Belichick giving up the most points he's ever allowed as a head coach, 48 in his first career game. And it's not like there was much to be happy about on the offensive side of the ball. After the scripted drives, Gio Lopez and the offense went nearly 2 hours without completing a pass. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions here for North Carolina. I think there's a lot of work to do ahead for Bill Belichick and company.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. We all knew that Colorado was going to have to make some adjustments anyway without Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders there. And on the other side, we knew that Haynes King is a very good quarterback who will beat you on the ground in the air. So that's not a huge surprise. But, Bill Belichick was in a very similar situation to Deion in his debut at Colorado, taking on TCU. And there was so much hype around Chapel Bill and all the anticipation of this game, especially being the only game on Labor Day. And Sonny Dykes said that he felt that TCU was a little disrespected, overlooked in all this hype, and the Horned Frogs were ready this time. They were not going to lose the way they lost to Colorado. And they were so ready and made Bill Belichick and his team look very unprepared, especially on defense. So I don't know if the Hypnotoad magic is back for TCU or not. But North Carolina has a lot of work to do. 2 games for Iowa State, including that win over Kansas State and Ireland, just 1 for Iowa. Does that put the Cyclones at an advantage or disadvantage going into Iowa this weekend?
I think it's actually a little bit of a disadvantage with that K-State game coming, that Iowa State really had to show its hand in terms of what it's doing on both sides of the ball, where I think Iowa was probably more working out the kinks for themselves. So I think Iowa State is at a little bit of a disadvantage with Iowa kind of understanding where the Cyclones are going into this game.
I think on the flip side of things, we know more about the type that team that Iowa State is at this point. There's still a lot of unknown about where Iowa is. There's a lot of new faces on defense. You have a new quarterback in Mark Gronowski still trying to figure things out. So Iowa at this point, we don't know a lot about them after that Albany win.
And so, from a defensive perspective, is that something that Iowa can take advantage of because we know a little bit more about Iowa State's playbook at this point?
Yeah, I think so, but I mean, to be honest, I think it's more about what Iowa is able to do for themselves because the passing game has just been such a challenge, and Mark Gronowski's highly anticipated Iowa debut was not stellar, and that didn't really quiet any criticism. So it's going to be more about whether Iowa can really put together any type of passing game, and you assume the run game is going to be solid, but it's more a bigger question about where the passing game is at.
With Iowa State's next win, Kirk Ferentz has a chance to break his tie with Woody Hayes and become the winningest Big Ten coach in history. Does Iowa have the team to help him break it against Iowa State and keep building on that throughout the season?
Well, I mean, that's the kind of great mystery right now because, there's, like I said, a lot of new faces and not exactly sure what Iowa has offensively and defensively. The Albany game, provided some hints to that, but we still don't really know. It feels like a high ceiling, low floor Iowa team.
Yeah, I think with what Iowa did in the passing game against Albany, Iowa State's defense has to be feeling pretty good because one of the issues that has popped up in the first 2 weeks is that young secondary getting beat. And if Iowa is going to be one-dimensional offensively, I think that plays really well into Iowa State's defensive game plan.
And yes, this was only week one, but Iowa's offense was a little bit more run heavy than I think some people expected. Tyler, does that say more about transfer quarterback Mark Gronowski or the strength of the run game this year?
Both, because I mean, I think people hoped that Mark Gronowski was going to be a little bit further along at this point, and that you need him to make kind of a big jump from week one to week two. But at the same time, Iowa's run game looked very similar to last season, even without Caleb Johnson. They have a stable of backs, and Kamari Moulton likely going to be out. We haven't gotten confirmation on that, but he wasn't on the depth chart. But Iowa has a handful of guys and a really good offensive line that have the ability to really make some offensive moves.
Iowa versus Iowa State in week two. Who wins and why?
I came into the season thinking that Iowa was going to be the team that wins this game. A large part of that was because Iowa State coming back from that Ireland week 0 game that I thought this was a bad spot. But Iowa State's been better than I thought through 2 weeks and didn't look like they had any sort of jet lag against South Dakota, while Iowa, I thought, frankly, was disappointing on Saturday. So I'm going to go with the Cyclones in this one.
I have Iowa State winning 24-20. I just feel like Iowa State at this point is more proven. They have at least entering the matchup a pretty wide advantage at quarterback. I think we just know more about the Cyclones at this point in the season. It's still kind of a mystery of where Iowa stands. So I think Iowa has more to prove at this point. We know a little bit more about Iowa State, so that's why I'm going to go with the Cyclones.